Your next electricity bill might look a lot higher than usual. And it's not because of a power outage. Canada just dropped a $10 billion energy bomb on the US, and it's about to change everything. With Ontario slapping a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the US, millions of Americans, especially in states like Michigan, Minnesota, and New York, are facing skyrocketing utility bills. But the impact goes beyond just your wallet. It's a political and economic game changer. In this video, we'll break down exactly how this energy retaliation affects you, what it means for the future of trade, and how Mark Carney's leadership could be the key to Canada's new power on the world stage. Stay tuned to uncover the full story behind this trade war escalation, and make sure to hit subscribe for more insights on how this will affect the global economy and your everyday life. Before we dive into the energy tariffs, let's set the stage for why things have escalated so dramatically. The current trade war between the US and Canada started to gain momentum in early March 2025 when President Donald Trump imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian and Mexican imports. These tariffs targeted key industries like steel, aluminum, lumber, and even dairy. The US claimed that Canada was benefiting unfairly from favorable trade deals, making it difficult for American manufacturers to compete. But Canada didn't take this lightly. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the tariffs a direct assault on Canada's economic sovereignty, which set the stage for what would become an unprecedented retaliation. Although the tariffs initially caused concern, the real shock came when Ontario's Premier Doug Ford decided to strike back by imposing a massive surcharge on electricity exports to the US. This move, which no one saw coming, marked a major escalation in the trade tensions between the two countries. Ontario's retaliation with a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the United States was a calculated and strategic response. Why energy? The simple reason is that Canada is one of the largest suppliers of energy to the US, especially in terms of electricity, oil, and natural gas. The move to slap a surcharge on electricity exports sent a clear message to the US. Canada wasn't going to sit idly by and absorb the economic blow from US tariffs. This electricity surcharge was not just an economic countermeasure. It was a political move, designed to hit American consumers directly, especially those in states like Michigan, Minnesota, and New York, which rely heavily on Canadian energy imports. The surcharge is expected to raise American electricity bills by up to $100 per month in affected states, creating a significant economic burden for families and businesses already feeling the strain of inflation and higher costs of living. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford argued that this was a necessary step in leveling the playing field after Trump's aggressive tariffs, stating that the American people didn't ask for this trade war, Trump did. This strategic move is also expected to generate between $300,000 Canadian dollars and $400,000 Canadian dollars in daily revenue for Ontario, which will help offset the costs of energy for Canadian residents. This not only protected Ontario's economy but also helped ensure that Canadians would not be the ones to bear the full cost of this trade war. But this surcharge is just one part of the larger picture. It signals that Canada is no longer going to be a passive player in these trade disputes. As expected, Ontario's electricity surcharge sparked a significant backlash in the United States. The decision to raise electricity costs for US consumers, especially in states that rely heavily on Canadian energy, has caused widespread concern. For example, in Michigan, the Public Service Commission has raised alarms about potential disruptions to the regional power grid. This is a serious concern, especially since the state depends on Canadian energy to meet its needs. The surcharge has the potential to destabilize the power grid, making it vulnerable to disruptions and cyber attacks, which could lead to widespread power outages. Additionally, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has accused the U.S. of engaging in economic warfare, urging President Trump to reconsider his trade policies. He has warned that these tariffs, both on imports and exports, could have far-reaching consequences for American consumers and the economy as a whole. Meanwhile, New York Governor Kathy Hochul criticized the tariffs as reckless, blaming the escalation on the trade policies of President Trump. She stated that the tariffs were contributing to economic instability and creating an environment of uncertainty that hurt both American businesses and consumers. What does this mean for everyday Americans? Well, if you live in states like Michigan, New York, or Minnesota, you could see higher electricity bills as soon as the surcharge is implemented. In addition, if the energy supply becomes unstable, it could lead to rolling power outages, making it harder to plan day-to-day activities. Ontario's response is more than just a counterstrike, it is a bold political statement. By imposing the 25% surcharge, Premier Doug Ford made it clear that Canada would not remain passive in the face of U.S. trade aggression. This marked a turning point in Canadian trade policy, signaling a shift away from the idea of accommodation. The surcharge on energy exports wasn't just about balancing the trade deficit, it was about making a statement that Canada could and would fight back when necessary. Ford's fiery press conference made it clear that Canada was taking a stand, and that Americans, not just their government, would feel the effects of the tariffs. But this decision also has broader implications. Canada is sending a message to other global powers that it is no longer content with being seen as the little brother in trade negotiations. Ontario's move suggests that Canada is ready to defend its interests and not back down in the face of economic adversity. At the same time, a key political shift has taken place in Canada. Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, is now the Prime Minister of Canada. His leadership marks a new chapter in Canadian politics, particularly when it comes to trade and economic policy. Carney, a highly respected global finance expert, has made it clear that he plans to take a hard stance on U.S. trade aggression. In his victory speech, he stated that retaliatory tariffs would remain in place until the U.S. agrees to fair and free trade policies. Carney is committed to strengthening Canada's energy sector, reducing reliance on the U.S. market, and creating new trade relationships with Asian and European countries. Carney's leadership is a game-changer for Canada's economic strategy. His background in managing economic crises and strengthening financial systems gives him the expertise to navigate complex trade disputes. He's already causing ripples in U.S. markets and is set to reshape Canada's position on the global stage. While some critics, like Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, have accused Carney of lacking transparency and warned that his policies could destabilize the Canadian financial system, Carney's vision for a more independent and resilient economy is already resonating with many Canadians. With strong backing from the Liberal Party, he's in a strong position to reshape Canada's trade policies. So, where does this leave Canada and the United States? Ontario's electricity surcharge is just the beginning. Premier Doug Ford has hinted at even more retaliatory measures in the future. These could include tariffs on American alcohol, food products, and automotive exports, a move that could send shockwaves through U.S. industries that rely heavily on Canadian resources. But the biggest threat Canada holds is its energy exports. As a major oil exporter, Canada is in a unique position to leverage its energy resources as a negotiating tool in future trade disputes. If Canada were to cut off or reduce its energy exports to the U.S., it would have massive consequences for American consumers, driving oil prices up and creating a global energy crisis. On the flip side, Carney's strategy is not just about retaliating, it's about reducing Canada's dependence on the U.S. market. He's pursuing a broader plan to build new pipelines, expand renewable energy production, and establish trade agreements with countries in Asia and Europe. This approach could make Canada a global energy superpower and give it much more leverage in future trade negotiations. Now, let's turn to the everyday impact. The most immediate concern for people in the U.S. is higher electricity bills. If you live in states like Michigan, Minnesota, or New York, you could see your monthly electricity costs increase by up to $100. This might not seem like much at first, but it will add up over time. And for households already struggling with inflation, it's a tough pill to swallow. On the Canadian side, things are a bit more complex. While the surcharge helps Canadian residents by lowering their own energy costs, it also signals a new, tougher stance in international trade. This could lead to more economic instability in the short term as trade tensions rise. But in the long term, it could position Canada as a more independent economic power. As we look ahead, it's clear that this trade war is far from over. The US and Canada are on a collision course that will impact not just energy bills, but also the global economy. How will these two countries navigate their differences? And will the energy war escalate even further? Only time will tell. With Mark Carney at the helm, Canada is entering a new phase of economic power. The future of US-Canada relations will depend on how both countries handle this energy standoff and whether they can find common ground or face even greater economic fallout. What are your thoughts on this escalating trade war? Do you think Canada's stance will force Trump to back down? Or is the world heading toward a bigger conflict? Drop your comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more updates as this situation develops.
Would soon skyrocket because of a trade war you probably didn't even know was happening? That's right, Ontario just hit the US with a massive 25% surcharge on energy exports, and the impact could be huge for millions of American households. With tensions between the US and Canada escalating, energy prices are on the rise. If you live in places like Minnesota, New York, or Michigan, you might see your electricity bills go up by $100 or more every month. But why is this happening? And what can we expect next? In today's video, we're diving into how this shocking move by Ontario could reshape North American energy markets, impact your wallet, and what it means for both US and Canadian consumers. We'll break it down with the latest stats, insider insights, and what's really at stake for your future energy costs. Stay tuned to find out how this trade war could affect your daily life. And make sure to subscribe to stay updated on the latest in global economics and energy news. In early March, the political landscape between Canada and the United States saw a dramatic shift, one that could reverberate across global energy markets. Ontario, the Canadian province, imposed a bold 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the US, following a series of retaliatory tariffs imposed by former President Donald Trump on Canadian aluminum and steel. This move has sparked a new chapter in the North American trade war, with consequences that are likely to impact not only businesses, but also everyday consumers. This move by Ontario is more than just a political statement. It's an economic maneuver that has the potential to shake up energy markets in both countries. But why did Ontario choose electricity as its weapon in this ongoing trade conflict? Electricity, a fundamental part of modern life, often operates quietly in the background of political discussions. However, in this case, it has become a key player in Canada's retaliation. Ontario supplies a significant amount of electricity to the United States, especially to regions like Minnesota, New York, and Michigan. According to Statistics Canada, Ontario exported 15.6 terawatt-hours TWH of electricity to the US. In 2021, which accounted for approximately 8% of total electricity consumption in the northeastern US. By imposing this surcharge, Ontario is sending a clear message to Washington about its willingness to take firm action in response to trade tariffs that many in Canada consider unfair. But why target electricity? The answer lies in the region's unique energy resources. Ontario has access to a diverse energy mix, including hydroelectric power, which gives the province a certain leverage over US energy imports. By imposing this 25% surcharge, Ontario can create a substantial financial burden for US consumers while simultaneously raising significant revenue to offset costs for local taxpayers back home. The real-world implications? Higher energy bills for millions of American households. In regions such as Minnesota and New York, where homes are heavily reliant on energy imports,